So welcome to this webinar, which is covering the relatively new national system for registering with a GP practice, which is part of the previous digital offering from NHS England. So I'm going to try to cover in the next half an hour what this product is doing, how we can look at it all together. And just to highlight, this webinar is being recorded, so if you don't want to be captured, please just turn off your cameras and make sure you're aware of that. If I could ask everyone to keep it on mute as much as possible. After we cover the main content, there'll be an opportunity for questions at the end. You're also welcome to post questions all the way throughout in the chat, and hopefully we'll pick them up as we go along. If we start off with, just to introduce myself, I'm Dr. Shankar Vijay. I'm a GP in Northwest London, but I'm your London Digital First GP clinical lead. And when we look at this product and you look at these slides, the top right, you've got a QR code which shows you the link for the register with my GP service web pages, which explains far more detail about the service. If you want to test or try the service, you can scan this QR code on the left. And you can almost be like a dummy patient trying the service at any point during the webinar. And if you want to learn a bit more about myself, I've got a QR code here with me. Anyway, let's look at this a bit more. And I'm going to start by giving you a challenge, which may seem really strange. I'm going to challenge you that when I go through these slides, you're going to see that the service is so simple to use, so quick to set up, that you could go live by the end of this webinar. And this is without me using any swords or threats or physical violence. And throughout, again, there are QR codes on these slides. Here's a demo of how this actually now works with the NHS app. And again, that sort of demo of as a dummy patient experience. So you could use your mobile phone and try it as we speak. And you may think that challenge seems quite a lot to ask in the next half an hour, but lots of practices have done exactly that during these webinars, and that might be just to get rid of me, who knows. So what are we going to cover in this webinar? I'm going to tell you, how does this product work? Why should we use it? How do we get set up? And then at the end, we'll close with some questions. So what's underneath the hood of this service? How does it actually work? Let's look around us. If we look at the government websites, they've started to change from not just information that you can look up to actually doing things. I don't know if you experienced renewing your passport online, but I found it just a breath of fresh air. You upload your photographs, that you don't have to rush to a passport booth somewhere. It tells you if the photographs are acceptable straight away, and it does the whole process for you. And you just post in your passport and it gets renewed. Similar, if you've got an old car like myself, when you renew your road tax, it automates the whole process. And the NHS is no different. From looking at for a new GP, if you're moving into an area, you can usually find a GP web page, and it sort of helps you through the process. And when we look at the design, there's a similarity here, the structure of the font, the buttons, the colours, and that's to meet accessibility standards. So it suits lots of patients with different needs when they're using online products and web pages. So there's a direction of travel that's been going on over the years. And this product, the Registered GP service, just fits into that. So if you try that demo, you basically land on a page that asks you to register with a practice, and you walk through steps as a patient. This is a free online service for all practices in England. So when you're facing cost pressures as a practice, facing potentially charges for increasingly things, this is not something that you're going to need to pay for. I'll pick up the question chat later on about the emails templates. But then if we also look at how the patients access this service, it's through your websites, posters, texts, the NHS website, the NHS app. We'll show that more later on. Really importantly, this does not automatically register the patient for you. You still retain autonomy and control as a practice. You just receive the information at the moment via NHS mail to your practice for you to process. So if that patient doesn't meet your criteria, there may be outside your catchment area or some other issue, you still remain control. It's not that automatically they're added to your practice. And genuinely, one of the big initiatives behind this service was to increase the admin burden for you as a practice. So if you're not currently doing online registrations and you're doing lots of paper forms, this should reduce the workload for your practice, and we'll pick that up later on. And again, all the way throughout, you can try this service. What questions are asked and why during this form? So first of all, a bit like my holiday photographer, we can all have different agendas here. So me as the doctor or the practice may want to ask lots and lots of questions to the patient to help my workload of getting all the information I need. But as a patient, we're going to think through about how many questions can they answer them accurately. So there are differences in that, and it's all about, like everything, compromise. So the questions are based on insights from GPs, professionals working in surgeries, and digital team members. But most importantly, they're constantly being evolved, changed, or removed based on feedback and experience. So this is not a static product. It will constantly keep updating. Right, I know this is a bit cheesy, but this is me going down a slide here to just point out that I'm going to rapidly go through the next set of slides to show you what that form is, but I don't want us to spend too long on it. The slide deck has already been shared in the calendar invite for this session, but I'll also make sure it's shared again at the end of this. So you don't need to feel that you're missing anything from there. Okay, right, sorry. Okay, so first of all, when the patient starts the process, it's a single form process that evolves with the questions to maybe tailor to the needs of the person completing the form. So just to clarify, there's not a separate adult form or a child form. They start the process and it just evolves to determine the need. Next most important point is you do not need a separate GMS1 form. And this is something that may have caused confusion over the years. If you had any sort of registration form that covered all the questions in the GMS1 form, you didn't need to have a separate GMS form 1 completed. And you can have that assurance that this is the national product. It covers all the questions that you need in the GMS form. So you definitely don't need a separate GMS1 form. In the past, there was a debate about wet signatures, that you still need a physical signature from a patient to get registered. And again, that is now encompassed with this solution, so you don't need to worry about that too. Finally, when you start the process, you can see that the patient gets asked who they're registering, is it themselves or someone else, but also do they want to use the NHS login. And just to emphasize, the NHS login here is still optional, so you can continue without. So if you're worried about digital exclusion or they must have an NHS login, that's not essential, but it can just obviously speed up the process by pre-populating the information from the NHS login details. Okay, so that's step 1 in this process. Let's whistle through the next pages. So it asks the patient about their name, then their date of birth. It then asks them about their NHS number if they know it. And if they don't, it links them to the web page to show them how to find it. So it reduces any queries that you may have from patients saying, oh, can you give me my NHS number? Because it signposts them to where they can find it. But importantly, it allows them to continue without it. So it's not a blocker if they don't know their NHS number or they don't want to find it. Asked about whether they've been registered with a previous UK GP. It asks about if they've got a current UK address. Then ask them sort of to confirm the address. And this is an important step here that can be really helpful for your practice. It flags if that address is outside the catchment area of the practice. So if you read the blurb here, so some GP surgeries will only accept patients that live within their catchment areas. You can continue with this registration, but it may not be accepted. So it already sets the patient expectations for you. And they've got the option to either continue at risk, that you as a practice might then say, well, sorry, we can't process your registration, you'll need to look elsewhere. Or it asks them if they want to go and search for another practice that does cover the area that they live in. So it helps manage this step for you. Talks about then contact details, how they want to be contacted and what are their contact details. Gender, ethnicity, and then another useful process step, whether they want to change their pharmacy. So that common scenario that they may have moved from another part of England, and they're still set up with EPS for their pharmacy up north. If we don't capture that change, people may not think about it. Their first consultation, GP doesn't realise it. They send the prescription to their old pharmacy. Then we have that whole hassle of whether we cancel, reissue it. So to reduce that workload, you've got the option to let them choose their pharmacy here. That can reduce the queries at reception, even when your receptionists have to give them lists of different pharmacies that they might want to consider, or even in that telephone consultation where the GP has to start to think of them options. And when it helps them find a pharmacy, so they put in a postcode, it lists options for them based on distance, and they can select one. It helps verify their selection with them about, is that the one you want to choose? And they mark continue. Just to be really clear, it doesn't do the switch for them. It will just give you the information of what one they would like to be chosen for them. And then when you process the registration, you can then activate that switch. So it just helps you gather the information about their choice and selection. Again, moving on to sort of GMS 1-style questions about armed forces, family members registered, emergency contact details, if they've moved from another part of the UK, where they were born, when they entered the UK, whether they have any relevant documents. Again, GMS 1 type questions. Following that through again about if they've got any particular documents that could be helpful. Are they returning from overseas? The date they left the UK, the date they returned, where they were born, and then the GP surgery that they're wanting to leave if they're currently registered. So it helps confirm their current GP practice if they're looking to leave that one. Then the previous UK addresses and details around that. Then we get to sort of more medical questions. So pre-existing or medical conditions, and then there's a list of ones they can select, and then they can free text some further information. Allergies, mental health conditions, and again, similar free text options to give more details. Disabilities, and that same pattern of a free text box. Have they got a carer? And then the carer details. And the opposite, are they a carer? And then what type of carer are they? Prescription medications. Alcohol, so questions about alcohol usage. Smoking, so have they smoked, and then sort of further details around that. Height and weight, so, and these are relatively newer additions in terms of questions. So, and it gives you the option of switching between imperial and metric measurements, so feet and inches or centimeters, stone and pounds or kilograms. It does that as well. And summary care record. So again, a newer addition to the flow. So we talked about how this constantly evolves, and it gives the options or clarification about whether they want to share and the summary care record. Right, that was the whole sort of adult sequence. If they were registering on behalf of someone else, like their child, some additional questions may pop out in the flow. So talking more about details of the sort of child that they're registering, educational details, anyone else involved in that child's care, from social worker, health visitors, more about vaccinations and any other additional information that's needed. So that was just a few extra questions you'd see in a child registration. And whatever's happening, whether it's an adult or child, they then get a checklist. So everything that they've selected so far, they have the option to change any answers, look at their answers again before they sort of accept and submit this to your practice. So that's the final button that they press. And they could celebrate. It can be so time-consuming or dull if you have to do the whole family. So if they've submitted the whole family's registration, they all get a confirmation, telling them what to expect. Again, in terms of setting expectations, they're really saying they should hope that you as a practice have sort of completed this process in the next couple of weeks. And I appreciate there's variations. Some of us may do this really rapidly within 24 hours, some of it may take longer, but it gives them that sense of expectation. It also flags about organ donation as well, just promoting that as well. But they've done their end. So I imagine you're all asking now, okay, we've seen the patient side of all of this. What happens to us? Well, how do we receive this information? Well, at the moment, you receive it at practice as an email to your NHS mail account, normally the generic account for your practice. And when you receive the information, what's really important is you get the information all within the actual content of the body of the email. So all the answers get listed in here, but you also get it as a PDF attachment too. So I know one of the questions is about integration and EMIS. We will pick up about that in the future. And it's not just about EMIS, obviously we're talking about all the different systems out there. But at the moment, if we're thinking about the basics, if you have a registration template in EMIS that you're entering in your new patient registration, you're probably going to cut and paste this into that template. And you also might then want to save that PDF into the document. But we will pick up in a moment later on about how that might evolve. But in this email, what's really important at the top here, for your busy admin staff, some important information is flagged at the top, so it's not lost lower down. And that might be, did they use the NHS login or not? Because if they use the NHS login, you may feel even more comfortable that their identity and the details are correct. And also, if they're outside the catchment area, that will be flagged at the top as well. So you can think, okay, are we going to process this, or are we going to reject this request because they're outside the catchment area? So that helps your admin team spot the important bits. So how do your patients find this? How do you roll this out at practice level? So there's the practice website. If you have details about how to register, you'll probably substitute this service in your practice website. So they go through into the form that way. If they use the NHS website, the Find a GP page will show you how they start to flow that way. And there's also the NHS app. And here's a little demo video I've made here. If you scan that QR code, you can see a video that just shows that. And I'll just show you that a bit later on, how they find it now through the NHS app. So here's an example of a practice web page where, maybe that, you have a process listed here and they click on a link to take them to the form for your practice. And there may be other bits that will show you about how you flow through. Here's the Find a GP page I mentioned. If you want to see the Find a GP page, scan the QR code or click on this link. But when they search on postcodes, you'll start to see, as your service and practice is returned, if you're set up with this national system, you get this box option here to click on to register online. And if you look at this as an example, the next practice along doesn't have that option. They're not set up with the national system, so that doesn't show as an option. And just to be really clear, it is only this national register with my GP surgery service that will show you this flow. If you have any other online registration system, at this point in time, there's no plans to give you this option and this flow here. We'll pick that up again in a moment. I've alluded to the NHS app. So here's my screenshot from my NHS app. And if you see this Find NHS Services here and you click on that, it takes you through. Now, I'm not going to plan to show this YouTube video, but this is a little video I've made that just demos a walkthrough of that experience. The product keeps changing, so that video is already slightly out of date. There's a few more questions that's been added to, but you get the genuine experience. This also could be a video that's useful to share for your reception team or admin team so they can understand how that flow works for patients. Right. What's the future though? I've alluded to it that this project keeps evolving, but although I'm your London Digital First GP lead, I promise you that I'm not so focused on the digital patients all the time. Completely understand it. Digital solutions do not suit all our patients. So there is a paper form version of this, and I'll give you a glimpse of that later on. So you can hand out that in the future to your patients that just simply cannot use this digital solution, but you have a consistency approach that the paper form is ordered in structure similar to the online solution. The questions are constantly being evolved, and recent additions include height, weight, revisions to alcohol, and summary care record. There's work around NHS app notifications that, if the patient does register, once you process the registration, that the patient may also be automatically notified that you've now processed the registration and they've registered with your practice. But like been asked in the chat, this interoperability is probably the top one. So we've shown you that this can reduce your workload by less paper, less handwriting to do and just cut and paste things. But the future is that hopefully this would arrive into your EMIS system in an automated fashion, that you process, you've got even less to do manually. That is the future. That is what the teams are working on. But realistically, that's more likely to arrive next year. And there can be challenges in that whole process, like we know when we want to add more functionality in our IT systems. But that's definitely something that we all understand is really valuable and really useful for all. So be under no illusion that that is a top priority to work on. But there are solutions in the interim. Right now, there are third-party automation providers or companies that will help you automate that manual data entry. There are costs, though, associated with most of those products, but that is a solution that you could look at now if you don't want to wait for the full interoperability. Okay, we've covered how does it work. Now I'm going to whistle through why should we use it? How do we set it up? We'll follow after that. So I hope that you've seen the benefits from reduction in paper. If you still don't feel that this suits your practice, just could I suggest that you still look at the product using these QR codes before making a final decision. But here is a situation that we're in at the moment. So this data is valid from last week. So 1,062 practices at least are using this across the country. So that represents, that sort of figure here, at least 17% plus of the country using it. But in London, we are the top region now in the country using this product. So 24% are using the product. So almost a quarter of a London practice already switched to using this. If you look at my ICB, obviously my home territory, we're higher. We're at sort of that figure there, 37. So well over a third of our practices. So the top ICB in the country. And you're not that far behind in NCL. So if you look at this, you're already at this figure here. You're almost hitting a quarter already. And that has surged. And I know that in your ICB, you had different products that were being used. And I think your digital first team are probably navigating you more to this product. So our hope would be that after this webinar, this just soars up as well. But you can see that lots of practices in your area are already using it. And here's a link that shows you the latest data on it. So many benefits for you as a practice. From the process I've shown you, you can see that there's better data quality. The patient is more likely to be spine matched. So less mismatches with address, name errors that you have to spend time looking through and asking the patient to correct. Reduce admin for you to process a form. And did I say it's free? If I haven't said it's free, I'm going to say it again. It's free, not another thing you need to budget for as a practice. It's a national solution. It's got that integration with the NHS webpage and the NHS app that other products just do not have. And it just fits in that whole digital connectivity that we're trying to promote. It helps you manage the catchment area issues for your practice. It's integrated with your eDec data to do that for you. And it fully meets the accessibility standards. So the accessibility standards are standards that we have to do online when we show content to patients and manage things. This is not a headache that you've got to do as a practice level thinking, oh, does my current solution meet those standards? Have I tackled everything? This headache you're passing to the national team and the product to keep making sure it's kept up to date. And it's also compatible with browsers inbuilt translation services as well. Not saying that that's the whole solution, but another thing you don't need to worry about whether your online platform works with the browser well enough. I'm not going to go through all of these wordy slides here, but I've just captured in a bit more detail about some of those benefits. You can read through that if you want to still be convinced. But I will pick up this last point about practice income. I'm going to put this question out here. And before I put this question out here, I just want to say that I'm a sessional GP. I have no profit share in any practice. I've got fixed income from my salary jobs. But when we look at practice profit and direction flow, is it the reality that more and more patients will use it as a decision making when picking a practice? If you look at your options and this practice allows you to click a budget and register then and there, and the other one doesn't link into the online solution, could that practice get more registrations than that practice? I'm just putting that out there. And we've already seen the data that almost a quarter of the practices are live with the solution. So as more and more practices and your neighbouring practices have it, can you as a practice afford not to be on the platform? And maybe that's one of the reasons why practices are racing to switch this on as well. Feedback. So here's a couple of nuggets from practices in my area, and I promise you I didn't force them to go live with the product. I didn't use swords or anything. I didn't pay them for these feedback, but you can see the themes. They just found it simple. Their teams liked it. They liked the branding and consistency of approach. And they also see the product keeps improving as well. But I want to give you a balanced approach. What do I see as the key limitations? And what do I see as the mitigations to those limitations? So the key limitation is this is a standardized form with standardized questions nationally. You cannot ask to locally tweak it, add this question in. But do we need to think about those questions that we want to add in? Are they too onerous? Do we add lots and lots of questions? Do we get variable patient responses? Do we actually deal with the data we get back? Do we have capacity? Are we getting more and more stuff through GP to GP transfer anyway? And you could still add local questions. You could ask to complete this national form and then contact the patient maybe in a digital manner to ask them to complete some further questions to complete the process. So you could still bolt on a local addition to this. It becomes a bit more clunky, but it's not impossible if you wanted to do that. Then the second thing, there's no option at the moment for this platform to upload any documents if you wanted proof of address, ID, etc. It's using the NHS login as the main authentication process. But again, as a local process, yes, you get the form coming in, you could supplement it if you really needed documents. You could obviously send either a particular type of two-way text message or ask the NHS mail for them to send images, stuff. But again, could I just challenge back? We are not meant to store this data. It's not meant to save it in the GP record. If we're trying to think about verification, it's very easy for patients to alter documents, addresses, Photoshop. How can we really police this? And we are aware, obviously, that the requirements of the NHS is that we cannot demand proof as a blocker for registration. So it is worth just thinking through the practice approach to this, but you could still resolve this locally. Right, suppose you launched this service today, you'd listened to this webinar, you thought, right, let's just go with the flow. Lots of practices are using it. Even if there's issues, there must be facing issues. Let's just launch it today. If you found that it didn't suit you, I'm going to show you how you can quickly pause or freeze the service and unroll yourself in an automated fashion. You still retain control if you want to switch it off. So we've covered how does it work, why we should use it. I really hope you believe now that you should seriously consider it. And I'm going to now whistle through how to set it up, and then we can start to close with questions. It's as simple as putting a few Lego pieces together. I'm going to show you 13 potential steps that I thought are good for practices to consider. But relax, you don't have to remember these steps. You don't have to do all of them. And you're going to have these slides and a recording for you. So if this is tiring, you need to grab a coffee, relax. But let's go through step one of the most important steps. You self-enroll through the NHS Profile Manager. You should probably have a login that you use to respond to website reviews, NHS website reviews. It's the same login, so you can log in and set yourself up. If you don't have access to it, here's the email address and the phone number for support to get access to the Profile Manager. And here's a QR code to get you quickly to Profile Manager too. When you log into Profile Manager, there's a box here that you might not have spotted. It's been added. So you click on here to sign up. And I'm going to show you just how this takes seconds. So you get a bit of blurb saying, are you ready for it? But click on continue. And it asks you to select the practice registration if you have a profile set with lots of practices. So first of all, if you are a practice manager that managing multiple practices, my heart goes out to you. It's tough enough managing one, and this is maybe what you end up seeing. But for most of us, probably we'll just see one option here of one practice that we're set up to manage. So it's going to ask you for the NHS mail address that you want to use for your practice to receive these incoming forms. Probably going to be the generic or shared mailbox for your practice. So you enter it in there. It will send a verification code to that email address. You get the code and you enter the verification code and you press continue. Obviously, a really sensible step to make sure that you've got no typos, that you're definitely receiving these emails and not going to your spam folder. So it just helps you know that you've got it. Then you're asked two questions, just two questions. Does your surgery offer a language interpretation service for patients? Surely the answer for all of us is yes. We click continue. Do you want to offer the patients the opportunity to nominate a pharmacy during the registration? I showed you that flow. I would really encourage you to say yes. I think it will reduce your workload, but you have the option to have no, and then your patients are not exposed to those options about whether they want to choose a change in their pharmacy. And that is it. You've done the whole process. It just tells you, do you want to confirm your email address? You'd confirm you said no or yes for language or no or yes for pharmacy, and you click confirm and complete. And you've done it. You get an email, you get an on-screen notification straight away saying you've set up, and you'll get an email confirmation. And there's one important detail in these emails, which is your unique link. And this is your unique web link that directs your patient to your version of that online registration form. So you do need to keep that safely. You can still find it, and I'll show you how you can find it if you lose it, but that's probably the most important thing in that email or that confirmation. And sorry, just to say also, the Find My GP webpage will then usually get updated within 2 working days to show that your service is active with this registration process. But let's just go back to Profile Manager for a second. Let's suppose, and I hope you do not want to ever pause this or switch it off, but if you wanted to, you just go back into Profile Manager, you go back to that same box, and it now just shows you your registered surgery. So you get a different experience because you're already set up. I've just tried to redact it, but it shows their practice, their email address, the settings that we've either set up, language interpreters, nominated pharmacists, and that's your unique link that remember I told you get in that email. So in case you've lost it, you can find it again here. And you can click on view details here if you want to amend something. So if you click on that, it gives you the option here, manage patient access. It's currently on. You can click on change. You can also change any of the other details there. And when you put change, you can have the option to turn it off. And it gives you the option to really completely turn it off and not be visible at all on the Find My GP, or just to turn it off sort of more as a temporary option. So you've got a couple of options here, and you've also got the option to turn it back on again if you did turn it off previously. So in brief, you can turn this on and off. That was the whole of step 1. I'm just going to go through now step 2, which is sometimes we've found that 20% of practices might have invalidly drawn catchment areas. That's not to say that your catchment area was wrong or you're in a dispute about where your lines are. More that there's just a glitch on how it's drawn out on your eDec data. So here's a screenshot example here where you can see this practice is drawn out with those lines here, but it's got these strange 2 additional lines cutting through the actual catchment area, and that causes glitches where the system cannot tell if the patient's in or out of these lines. The quickest way to test if you've got a glitch is to just use the Find a GP webpage, maybe use your own GP practice postcode and see if you're returning top of the list, which you should be generally. To be really clear, this glitch has got nothing to do with the Register My GP surgery service. It just emphasizes the glitch. This glitch, if you've got it, is already affecting you as a practice using the Find a GP webpage. And it may be that a glitch on your eDec data and how it's put on the portal. The solution here, if you do find you've got a glitch, is you've got to redraw the catchment area and resubmit it by the SDCS webpage, which is here, and it's in this QR code here. If you're struggling with that, you might want to reach out to your primary care borough team for assistance in this. But that's a glitch detection step that's worth doing. Right, step 3. The emails are coming through to your NHS mail address. I would really encourage the use of creating a subfolder for the registration forms and a NHS mail rule. I do find a lot of practices don't utilise the power of NHS mail rules. So here's an example here of a rule you could set up. So first we go into your settings, email rules, you could just create a rule, maybe add a condition that any emails from the national email address are automatically moved into your registration subfolder. If you want to be a bit flash, you might, if you're using categories in NHS mail, you could also add a category of registration just to add an extra flag to really show this email's about registration. So that could just help your admin team, particularly if you've got an admin person dealing with registrations in particular, who are then looking at that subfolder. It's not lost in your whole inbox. That's step 3. Step 4, I would say test the system. Do a test patient yourself, see it's working. Here's a photo from one of the pilot practices of this service, where they're just engaging with patients, testing product. And if you want to learn more about this practice experience, scan this QR code here. Step 5, on your practice website, think about updating the web page with the link. So just a reminder, that link that the national team would give you when you self-enroll, that's your unique link that flows patients to the form. So you may just want to update your web pages and update the process. Just look at the flow of the content, thinking whether you need to update it. If you're having any struggle updating your web page, I imagine your website provider can assist you. So now step 6, practice promotion. I would encourage maybe putting a poster like this, maybe in your front door, your window, so that if patients, wander up to your practice when you're shut, they can see this poster showing them how to register, and you can have a QR code that takes them to your process. You can scan this QR code to download such an editable poster. There's also a link here to the national team's collection of comms resources. It's not just about posting. You may have a media screen or social media or texting, things that you can do. Here's an example of a media screen slide that's similar that you might want to add in. Probably has less value because I guess new patients aren't usually hovering around in your waiting room for long enough to do that. I personally think you also need to put one of those posters near your reception desk area too. Step 7, how do you create a QR code? So it's a total tangent to this webinar. Even if you don't go to all the service, learn this really useful tip because you can put this on everything you do in your practice. It's really simple, it takes seconds. If you look at the Edge browser now and you paste any web address into the address bar and hover, you'll see this icon emerge, which actually looks like a QR code. If you click on that, it instantly creates and shows you a QR code for the address that you put into that address bar. And all you do is need to click download. It downloads that QR code as an image and just paste that anywhere you want to use it. It takes seconds to do. But even if you struggle with that, reach out to the Registered Rhythm and GP Surgery team and they can try and help you create your QR code for you. Chrome browser does exactly the same, just a very slight difference. You click on this icon here, you go to create QR code to find it. And the difference is when it creates a QR code, there's a bit of dead space in the center, which is filled by a dinosaur. So you can either keep that dinosaur and have a Jurassic theme to your QR code, or if you want to be creative and you have practice logos and things, you can just use that dead space to put your logo in the center here. So that's the two differences between it based on creativity. Right, so hopefully I've shown you how to create a QR code to put into your poster and lots of other posters around your practice. Go mad with it. But step 8 is your registration form. Even if you keep in registration form, the paper form, maybe just add a bit of blurb saying, here's an example I've created. Did you know it could be fast for us to process your register form if complete online? If possible, visit our webpage or scan this QR code. So even if your reception team are handing out lots of paper copies, you're still trying to see if they can convert to using the digital process that could reduce your workload downline. But I've told you that they're working on the paper version and hopefully going to be released really, really soon. And here's some images of that form. So you can see this is page 1, page 2. This is page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8. So you can see it's really professional. And I think even if you need to localize it, you probably add additional pages at the end. So could you then also complete our other additional questions? But maybe you would like to adopt this to get a consistent approach from the digital and paper journeys for your patients. Step 9, text presets. So I know we battle with text costs and stuff, but useful to notify patients. And here's some examples that I think are useful. One about telling them that they've now been, if a new patient was walking in and you want to try and tell them this is a link to register, that could be useful. Here's one to just tell them that you've now processed the registration and also just encourage them to download the NHS app if they haven't done so too. And then here's a text example of when you've decided you cannot process their registration because they're outside your catchment area, but you're navigating them back to the final GP page to find an alternative option of practice. Step 10, your practice's main email account. You may want to, I really think auto replies are really important to help safety net any emails you get incoming from the practice. And here's an example of that. You may just want to add in want to register with your practice, visit your unique link here to just reduce your workload from if you get queries from patients interested in registering your email with your practice by email. Similar with email signatures, as step 11, maybe some key staff elements. So your key reception lead or admin lead might want to just add it into their signature. So again, reminds them when they're emailing back with responding to queries from interested patients. Step 12, so talking about the EMIS template. So you might want to reach out to your local ICB team, but the template you're using to register patients might need tweaking about the flow to order it, so it makes it faster for you to cut and paste entries in. Appreciate that's not still perfect and ideal, and we've raised again that's ideas should be fixed centrally as well. Okay, I've gone through everything. We're coming towards the end now, but probably the final most important step is really get your practice team to understand it. They can't really promote it to patients on the phone if they don't feel comfortable about it themselves. It's difficult if you don't really understand it. And here's again a QR code for feedback from one of the early pilot practices in Northwest London. And you can see that they generally felt the team embraced it because it reduced their workload. Okay, we've gone through how does it work? Why should we use it? How do we set it up? It may have been faster than you'd hoped for, but we're now on the final slide, which is closing questions. And before I do close for questions, here are useful links to things I've shown you through the webinar. This slide deck is being shared already and will be shared again afterwards. And I know there's lots of comments on the chat as well. But before we close, does anyone want to either come off mute and ask a question if they felt it hasn't been responded to at all in the chat? I'll pick up a few of the questions that I can see in the chat as well. So hopefully you picked up about the EMIS integration that in the short term maybe needs tweaking of the current templates used for registration, but in the longer term, looking at integration with it. The comments about can a computer be providing reception to help with registration? So I don't think you'll find that that can be done from national forward, but any online device can easily click it, feed into this form. So whether it's a tablet or that could be a solution as well, but you probably need to reach out within your ICB about whether there's any funding or not to help you with that. Literacy, you still obviously need to be able to, as a patient, complete some of these questions. I would never suggest this is the whole solution for all of our patient demographics. And some of the questions can still be difficult, but one good thing about an online solution is sometimes family and friends can assist them in that process, and they can do that outside of your practice building, because this is a 24-hour 7 solution, which can reduce pressures at reception when we're trying to help them with those queries. I think that is the main question. Oh, there's the last question about is the last person of that slide Jahan Mahmoodi. You're correct. That slide that I showed you about practice team was that particular GP in practice in Brent, Northwest London. So one of the early pilot practices. I've got a question about, does the pharmacy details get automatically updated? No, you get the information on the form that shows you the patient's preferred switch, so you can feel empowered them when you register them to carry out the switch in that pharmacy details as part of registering with them. So it's not automatically done, but it collects the choice for you for the patient. So it reduces your workload that you have to reach out to the patient to tell them their choices and options and collect their decision. Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions come up. I really hope this session has been helpful. I'm conscious we are now reaching the end of time allocated. So could I just say as a final personal viewpoint, we're really busy in practice, and you've given up 45 minutes of your time to attend this webinar. Really appreciate that. I understand we have endless task lists to do as a practice. I know you may think I've suggested the wrong approach at the beginning, but some practices just literally just switch it on, and they think of this as a national solution, and they figure out the detail as they go live. You may feel that is bad practice management, but the other extreme is obviously it's on your to-do list, and it stays on your to-do list for a long time, and you have to have those practice meetings and practice discussions, and you always run out of time and you never get around to doing it. Maybe there's a balance also between the two. The beauty of this is that the growth of the practice, as more and more practices race to this, the product just gets better and better and better. It is easier to have the conversations with EMIS and System 1 when the majority of practices are using it. It doesn't even need us to chase it because they want to keep the users happy. So some of the questions in the chat, we can all work collaboratively, and it is more likely we'll get them resolved faster as more and more practices on board onto this product. So I'd really encourage you that this product has had already a couple of years of piloting. You're joining at the right time now, and you can see those data across London, and the team are here to support you on that switch. So I find now that practices do manage this really quickly on their own with these slides and stuff, but we are there here to support it, and just say reach out to us if you need any assistance. I think I'll close on that point, because we've now reached 12 o'clock, and I would really, really, again, thank you for your time. look at the recording slides will be shared at the end. Yeah, I'd like to wish you the best for the rest of your day. So thank you.